Good afternoon, everyone. The stand down of progressive forces in the United States to the Obama administration has had many disastrous consequences in the U.S. and around the world. There's so much evil to expose and so little time to talk about it all. But today we're talking about Africa, and I want to talk about the terrible role that the U.S. has played in causing suffering for millions of people on the continent, from Libya to Congo to Somalia. It isn't an exaggeration at all to say that Africa would be able to prosper were it not for the interference of the Western world. Somalia was emerging from years of war when the Bush administration used Ethiopia to invade that country and kill hundreds of thousands of people. In 2011 alone, 250,000 Somalis died of starvation as a direct result of the warfare which was instigated by the U.S. Just as in the 19th century, when European nations carved up African spheres of influence at the Berlin Conference, in the 21st century, the U.S. and other Western nations decide who will control Africa's destiny. They may decide to overthrow a government, as they did in Libya, or pit one country against another, as they have done by supporting Uganda and Rwanda in their invasions and plundering of the eastern Congo that have killed 6 million people. As he has done all over the world, Obama has accelerated the pace of U.S. intervention in Africa, and he has legitimized practices which previously would not have been acceptable to people who attend events called left forum. The 1% committed the perfect crime when they chose Barack Obama to be president in 2008. They have been able to hide their evil doing behind a brown face, and Africa would be Exhibit A if there were true justice on this planet and the crimes committed against Africa were ever prosecuted. The U.S. Africa Command, AFRICOM, began in 2008, but has reached its peak of influence under the Obama administration. Drone bases exist in Ethiopia, Niger, Burkina Faso, and the Seychelles. Special forces are stationed in Uganda, Kenya, the Central African Republic, and the South Sudan. Africa holds a special place in the hearts and minds of Black Americans, but as with every other issue that Obama touches, the urge to defend the president outweighs every other imperative and makes a mockery of the word African in the term African American. The saga of Susan Rice is a perfect example of how this tragic comedy plays out. Rice began her career in the Clinton administration, serving on the National Security Council. She and her boss should forever be scorned as they watched the genocide unfold in Rwanda, but did nothing. They did nothing because Rwanda was then, as it is today, a U.S. client state. Rice climbed the diplomatic ladder and was confirmed as U.S. ambassador to the United Nations in the Obama administration. In that position, her name became a household word, but for all the wrong reasons. Susan Rice was one of the administration's strongest advocates for regime change in Libya. She helped to concoct the worst lies about the Gaddafi regime in order to make the case for U.S. and NATO intervention. She was among those who spread false tales about Gaddafi supplying his troops with Viagra in order to commit rape on a mass scale. It was a lie, and someone as supposedly smart as Rice had to know that. While Libya descended into chaos and African migrants and dark-skinned Libyans were targets for rape and other atrocities, then Rice said nothing. Of course, the chickens do always come home to roost, as the saying goes, and that is what happened at Benghazi, where the U.S. ambassador and others were killed. Rice and her boss bet on the jihadi horse to take out Gaddafi. They won the bet, but then had to deal with an unwieldy marriage of convenience. The ambassador was killed by some of the very same people who Rice and Obama put in power. Republicans made enough hay out of Benghazi and Rice's public statements that she was thwarted in her ambition to be nominated as Secretary of State. But not before the Black misleadership class, and sadly, popular Black opinion was foolishly directed in her favor. The lack of good reporting, especially as it relates to Africa, or even any basic knowledge of African history, combined with the desire to protect the Black face seated in a high place, gave Rice cover, despite the terror she helped American presidents wield against African people. Senator John McCain played a sorry role in this. He not only criticized Rice's much-discussed Benghazi talking points, but also felt compelled to add that she was not qualified and opined, "I don't think she's very smart." Those were fighting words for black people who were always sensitive when seeing a successful black person being brought down in any way. It was galling to many people to see the old right-wing white man who made his career from family ties, entitlement, and marriage to a rich woman criticizing a black Rhodes Scholar who works for the beloved black president. The Rice Defense League leaped into action, writing online petitions, irate op-eds, and inspiring an outraged citizenry. Of course, the Rice explanation was phony because the Obama administration didn't dare tell the truth about what it had done in Libya and how the chaos they created ended up killing an American diplomat. There was no massacre in that very same Benghazi, no Viagra-laden troops, just a voracious U.S. and its partners, Britain and France, who decided they ought to take out a militarily weak but oil-rich nation because they could get away with it, as the Arab Spring unfolded with unknown consequences for the West. And they got away with it because they made common cause with Gulf monarchists and jihadists, and some of those jihadists didn't, as the saying goes, stay in their place. The righteously angry didn't talk about what Rice had done to Rwanda or to the Congo. As UN ambassador, she actively worked to delay reports on human rights violations in the Congo committed by America's friends in Uganda and Rwanda. We described this phenomenon in Bar last November. Quote, the first document, a mapping report, described human rights violation in the Democratic Republic of the Congo from 1993 through 2003. Finally published by the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights in October of 2010 after long delays, the document specifically charges Rwandan troops with engaging in mass killings that, quote, might be classified as crimes of genocide, unquote. The more recent report by a UN group of experts concludes that M23, the Congolese so-called rebel group that captured Goma, is actually a Rwandan creation, embedded with Rwandan soldiers that take their orders from Paul Kagame's military. Uganda also supports M23. No matter. The Congressional Black Caucus couldn't find the time to condemn U.S. action in that region, but they publicly upheld Rice as a symbol of the black success story, with her career ambition having been derailed by those mean old Republicans. Rice and her boss, Barack Obama, ought to be condemned for what they did in Libya and for what they continue to do in the Congo. It is just one of a long list of crimes that Obama has gotten away with, and sadly with the support of people who once would have stood up for the motherland. Obama's ability to lie so well is always dangerous, but particularly so as his policies relate to Africa. Needless to say, he wouldn't have been chosen to serve as president if he hadn't promised to continue the imperial project in the first place. Now Rice will serve as National Security Advisor, where she will continue all the wrongdoing demanded by the U.S. government. The problems go deeper than Susan Rice, however, who is, after all, acting like mid-level managers everywhere who do what their bosses tell them to do. As we've said in Black Agenda Report, there is now no constituency in the U.S. which acts to protect African interests. Before money took over black politics, and before there was a black president for people to rapturously rally around, there was at the very least lip service of concern expressed for the plight of African people. In short, the black community's love for all things Obama has proven disastrous yet again. Today I was online. I saw a Twitter posting from Doctors Without Borders, and I saw a story about the Congo, and I'll briefly read it to you. It tells the story of a woman named Victorine. Victorine and her family fled their home near Goma in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo during 4 days of violent clashes in late May between the Congolese army and the M23 rebel group. She is now one of up to 5,000 people taking refuge in Sotraki Stadium on the outskirts of the city. This was the third time since 2008 that the family has been forced to flee. The last time was just 6 months earlier during the M23 attack on Goma in November 2012, when the family spent 2 weeks sheltering in a school as they waited for the fighting to die down. The experience of this family is entirely due to American support of the so-called rebels who mask Ugandan and Rwandan interests. But I would be remiss if I didn't connect the reaction or lack of reaction to what is happening in Africa to the larger issue of the crisis in left-wing politics. Here at an event called Left Forum, we must ask ourselves why the role of the US and NATO in destroying Africa isn't more widely known. Of course, the corporate media have done their usual job in either ignoring or outright lying about how deeds concocted in Washington, London, and Paris have caused such suffering. But we can't be shy either in calling imperialism, imperialism, or genocide, genocide. There's no reason to distinguish ourselves as being on the left if we go along with terror, as long as it's committed by Democrats. The war on Africa now is primarily an American one. As Americans with claims of conscience, we must be the ones who expose the wrongdoing which comes straight from Washington.